Got it. Here's the text exactly as you provided it. The Shadow in the Walls. Chapter 1. The House That Whispered. The Caldwell House had stood for nearly a century, perched on the edge of Ravenswood, a town that barely existed on any map. Legends spoke of those who had entered but never left, of whispers that could be heard in the dead of night, calling out names of the long forgotten. Some said the house had a heart, a pulsing, living entity that fed on fear. Others claimed to have seen figures moving behind the windows, even though no one had lived there for decades. The house was infamous, abandoned for decades, yet no one dared tear it down. People whispered about the ones who had lived there. Their screams still echoed in nightmares of those who passed too close. Ethan Blackwood didn't believe in ghosts. A seasoned journalist, he had made a career out of debunking urban legends. So, when he was assigned to investigate Caldwell House, he eagerly accepted. Armed with his camera, notebook, and a stubborn determination, he drove into Ravenswood one crisp October evening. The house loomed against the fading sky, its windows hollow and black, like the empty sockets of a skull. The front door was slightly ajar, swaying with the wind, as if inviting him inside. As he stepped across the threshold, a shiver ran down his spine. The air inside wasn't just cold, it was wrong. The moment he entered, the whispers started, low, almost imperceptible, crawling beneath his skin like insects. They knew he was here. Chapter 2, the first night. The air inside was stale, thick with the scent of decay and something metallic. Dust floated lazily through the dim light of his flashlight. The floor creaked under his weight as he moved from room to room, taking photos of the peeling wallpaper and the graffiti left behind by past trespassers. Then he heard it, a whisper, faint, almost too soft to notice. He spun around, his flashlight slicing through the darkness. Nothing. Just the empty house settling, he told himself. He set up his camera and recording equipment in what appeared to be the living room, then laid out his sleeping bag. It was going to be a long night, but as he lay down, staring at the cracked ceiling, he felt it, a breath against his cheek, then a voice no louder than a sigh. "You shouldn't have come." Got it. Here is the text exactly as you provided it. Chapter 3, The Sound Behind the Walls. At 2:47 a.m., Ethan awoke to a scratching sound. It was coming from the walls. He sat up, heart pounding. The sound was rhythmic, deliberate, like nails dragging against the wooden beams behind the wallpaper. He grabbed his flashlight and approached the nearest wall. "Hello?" he called out, feeling ridiculous. The scratching stopped. Then a low, raspy whisper slithered through the air. "Let me out!" A chill ran down his spine. He stumbled back, nearly knocking over his camera. His logical mind fought against the growing dread in his chest. Just the wind, he told himself. Just the wind. Something knocked from the inside of the wall. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Then from the corner of his eye, a shadow moved inside the wall. Chapter 4. The room that wasn't there. Determined to prove there was a rational explanation, Ethan began searching the house. He tapped against the walls, listening for hollow spaces. Then, in the hallway near the staircase, he found it, a section of the wall that sounded wrong. Excitement surged through him. A hidden room? He pulled out his knife and started cutting through the brittle wallpaper. Beneath it was a wooden door, one without a knob. It was nailed shut. His breath hitched. This wasn't just an old, forgotten storage space. Someone had sealed this door. He pried at the boards with the knife until one by one they snapped away. With a deep breath, he pushed the door open. The stench hit him first. Rot, decay, death. Inside, the room was impossibly dark. His flashlight barely penetrated the void. Then he saw them, deep scratches on the wooden floor, leading toward a corner where something had been dragged. Something human-sized. Then the floor beneath him groaned, like something had just shifted. Then he saw them. Fingers, thin and blackened, sliding from the cracks in the walls. Got it. Here is the text exactly as you provided it. Chapter 5. The Figure in the Darkness. The whisper came again, this time right behind him. Too late. Ethan spun around, but the doorway was empty. Cold sweat trickled down his back. He backed into the room, scanning the darkness, pulse hammering in his ears. Then his flashlight flickered. The darkness around him seemed to pulse, as though it had a heartbeat of its own. The air grew dense, pressing against his skin like unseen fingers. shadows stretched unnaturally, creeping toward him despite the lack of movement. The very walls seemed to shudder, exhaling a low, shivering breath. For a fraction of a second he saw it. A figure crouched in the farthest corner, its limbs twisted, its eyes gleaming like wet obsidian. Its mouth stretched too wide, a grin that didn't belong on a human face. Then the light went out. Something breathed against his ear. Then something laughed. Chapter 6, the walls close in. Ethan ran. He didn't care about his equipment, about the story. He just needed to get out. But the house had changed. The hallway was longer. The doors led to the wrong rooms. Shadows twisted unnaturally in the corners. He sprinted to where the front door should have been, only to find a solid wall. The house wouldn't let him go. The whispers rose again, this time overlapping, voices layered upon voices. Some pleaded, some laughed, some screamed. Then from the ceiling a single cracked eye opened. Got it. Here is the text exactly as you provided it. Chapter 7, The Truth Beneath the Floor. Breathless, he stumbled into the kitchen. The air was thick with an acrid, coppery scent, like blood left to dry. The dim glow of his flashlight flickered over the countertops, revealing rusted knives that seemed to have been recently disturbed. A single spoon rolled off the counter and clattered onto the floor. He hadn't touched it. A soft creak echoed from behind him, like the sound of a cabinet door easing open on its own. Something unseen was moving, just out of sight. The air was thick, suffocating. His flashlight, barely functioning, illuminated the center of the room, where the floorboards were slightly raised. A trapdoor. He grabbed at it, yanking it open with shaking hands. Beneath, a tunnel descended into darkness, and at the bottom, corpses. Dozens of them. Some mummified, some fresh, and they all had the same twisted, grinning expression. Then he saw something move. Chapter 8, the last entry. Ethan's last recording was found days later, retrieved from his abandoned equipment. The footage was shaky, his voice ragged with terror. "They live in the walls," he whispered. "They've always been here." A sound interrupted him. A soft chuckle, low, guttural, and wet, as if something was trying to imitate human laughter but failing. It wavered, distorted, stretching into an unnatural echo that bounced through the walls. The air grew colder, and Ethan could feel it crawling against his skin. Something unseen, but watching, waiting. The camera jolted, crashing to the ground. Then, a final whisper, before the video cut to black. "Now, so will you." His body was never found. But sometimes late at night in the abandoned Caldwell house, the walls still whisper his name.